They called it the Silent Settlement. When Serafina Thorne walked into the Manhattan Distinct Court to divorce her tech mogul husband Marcus, everyone expected a war. Marcus had hired the most vicious lawyers in New York. He had hidden assets. He had a mistress waiting in the car. He expected screaming. He expected tears. Instead, Serafina didn't say a word. She didn't negotiate. She didn't argue. She signed everything away in 3 minutes and walked out. Marcus thought he had won the lottery. But he didn't know that 6 hours later, a paparazzi drone would capture Serafina in the Mediterranean, clinking champagne glasses, on a yacht owned by the one man Marcus feared more than God. This isn't just a divorce story. This is the story of the most brutal, brilliant revenge plot in high society history. The air inside the private arbitration room at Bradford and Ellis smelled of stale espresso and aggressive cologne. It was the scent of expensive misery. Marcus Thorne sat at the head of the mahogany table, leaning back in his Herman Miller chair with a posture that screamed studied casualness. He checked his Patek Philippe watch for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. He wanted this over with. He had a flight to Aspen scheduled for 6:00 p.m., and Jessica, his personal assistant turned fiancée, was already blowing up his phone with texts about which ski chalet they should book. Across from him sat Serafina. If Marcus was a portrait of nervous energy disguised as arrogance, Serafina was a statue. She wore a charcoal business suit, vintage Dior tailored so sharply it looked like armor. Her hair was pulled back in a severe chignon, no jewelry, not even her wedding ring. That had been left on the nightstand of their penthouse in Tribeca 3 weeks ago, the morning she found the second phone taped under the vanity drawer. "Look, Serafina," Marcus said, his voice dropping to that condescending baritone he used when explaining algorithms to investors. "We can do this the hard way or the easy way. My offer stands. You get the apartment in Connecticut, the Audi, and a monthly stipend of $10,000 for 3 years. No equity in Thorne Logic. No stock options. No alimony after 2027. Marcus's lawyer, a shark named Gavin Rourke, who was famous for making senators' wives cry, slid a thick document across the table. Rourke smirked. "It's generous, Mrs. Thorne, considering you have no income and limited marketability at your age." Serafina was 34. She looked 25. But in Marcus's world, the cutthroat ecosystem of New York tech startups, she was ancient history. The silence in the room stretched. Rourke clicked his pen, a rhythmic tick-tick-tick designed to induce anxiety. Marcus watched her carefully. He knew Serafina. Or he thought he did. He expected her to break. She had been the supportive wife for 10 years. The one who hosted the dinner parties, who smoothed over his PR disasters, who proofread his code in the early days when they were living on ramen in a basement in Queens. She was emotional. She was soft. "I don't want the Connecticut house," Serafina said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried a strange crystalline clarity. Marcus sighed, rolling his eyes at Rourke. "Here we go. What do you want Sarah of the Hamptons house?" "I told you that's tied up in the LLC. "I don't want the Hamptons house," she said, looking down at the papers. "I don't want the Audi. I don't want the stipend." Rourke stopped clicking his pen. "Excuse me." Serafina reached into her purse a battered leather tote that had seen better days and pulled out a cheap Bic pen. "I'll sign the waiver for all assets. I'll sign the NDA. I'll grant Marcus full ownership of Thorne Logic and all associated IP. Marcus froze. He sat up straight, his eyes narrowing. You're waiving your rights to the marital assets. Serafina Thorne Logic is valued at $400 million. "I know what it's valued at, Marcus," she said. She didn't look up. She flipped to the last page of the settlement. "Why?" Marcus asked, a sudden spike of paranoia piercing his chest. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Serafina said, her eyes finally meeting his. They were terrifyingly blank, like the windows of an empty house. "I just want to be done. I want to be free of you, today, right now." "You have to understand," Rourke interjected, looking confused for the first time in his career. If you sign this, you leave with nothing. Literally nothing. You'll be destitute. I'll manage, she said. Scritch, scratch. The sound of her signing the document was the loudest noise in the room. She signed 3 copies. She closed the folder and slid it back to Rourke. Is that it? She asked. Marcus was stunned. He felt a rush of euphoria. A dopamine hit stronger than any deal he'd ever closed. He had won. He had expected a year-long battle. He had expected to lose half his fortune. Instead, she had just rolled over. She was weaker than he thought. She was pathetic. Yeah. Marcus laughed, a nervous, giddy sound. Yeah, Sarah. That's it. You're free. Serafina stood up. She smoothed her skirt. She didn't look at Marcus again. She didn't look at the lawyer. She turned on her heel and walked out of the conference room. Wait! Marcus called out, a sudden impulse of pity hitting him. Sarah, how are you getting home? Do you want me to call you an Uber? She stopped at the door. She didn't turn around. Don't worry about me, Marcus, she said. I have a ride. The door clicked shut. Marcus turned to Rourke and pumped his fist. Did you see that? Did you see that total capitulation? God, I'm a genius. She didn't even ask for the dog. Rourke frowned, looking at the signature on the page. It's too easy, Marcus. People don't just walk away from $500 million. She did. Marcus scoffed, pulling out his phone to text Jessica. She's broken Gavin. I broke her. Now let's get a drink. I'm officially a single man. But as Serafina stepped out of the office building onto Fifth Avenue, she wasn't crying. She wasn't looking for a taxi. She checked her watch. 11:15 a.m. She walked 2 blocks east to the corner of 57th. A black car was waiting. Not an Uber, not a town car. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, the windows tinted so dark they looked like obsidian. The driver, a massive man with a scar running down his neck, stepped out and opened the rear door. Good morning, Mrs. Thorne, the driver said. Or should I say Ms. Sterling? Serafina finally smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just watched the trap snap shut. Ms. Sterling is fine, Grigori, she said, sliding into the cream leather interior. Take me to Teterboro. The jet is waiting. And the luggage? I left it all, she said, leaning back and closing her eyes. Everything I need is already on board. Marcus Thorne was drunk on victory and 3 neat scotches. By 2:00 p.m. he was at Le Bernardin holding court in a private booth. Jessica was there looking stunning and expensive in a red dress that Marcus had bought her with the company credit card. She was draped over him, giggling as he recounted the story of the morning. She literally just signed it, Jessica asked, eyes wide. She didn't want the jewels, the art. Nothing. Marcus shouted, slamming his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. She's an idiot, Jess. A total doormat. She probably thinks she's taking the moral high ground. Moral high ground doesn't pay the rent in Manhattan. The table laughed. It was filled with Marcus's sycophants, his CFO, his frat brothers, his yes men. They toasted to Marcus's genius. To the Bachelor King, yelled Dave, the VP of Marketing. Marcus raised his glass. To freedom and to upgrading. He kissed Jessica hard. But amidst the celebration, a small nagging feeling began to itch at the back of Marcus's brain. It was Gavin Rourke, his lawyer. Rourke hadn't come to the lunch. He had gone back to the office to file the papers, immediately paranoid that Serafina would change her mind. Marcus's phone buzzed. It was Rourke. Calling Gavin Rourke, attorney. Buzzkill, Marcus muttered, declining the call. It buzzed again immediately. Answer it, babe, Jessica said, tracing the rim of her glass. Maybe she's already begging for money. Marcus laughed and picked up. Gavin. Tell me the ink is dry. Tell me she's officially the past. Marcus, where are you? Rourke's voice was tight, strained. I'm at lunch, celebrating. Why, what's wrong? I'm at the clerk's office, Rourke said. I just filed the settlement, but Marcus, something triggered in the system when I entered the final decree. Triggered what a fee. No, a lien notification. I'm looking at the title deeds for the Tribeca penthouse and the Hamptons estate. Marcus, did you take out a second mortgage? What, no. The company is flush. Why would I take out a mortgage? Because according to the county clerk, neither of these properties belongs to you or the LLC. Marcus lowered his glass. The noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away. What are you talking about? I bought them. My name is on the deed. Your name is on the trust, Rourke corrected. The Aurora Borealis Trust. You told me that was your holding company. It is. I set it up 5 years ago. Marcus, Rourke whispered, I'm looking at the incorporation papers for the trust right now. You aren't the beneficiary. You're listed as the trustee. The beneficiary is an offshore entity registered in the Cayman Islands called Nemesis Holdings. Okay, so that's probably just how my accountant set it up to dodge taxes. I called your accountant, Rourke said. He didn't set up Nemesis Holdings. He's never heard of it. But I did a quick search. The signatory for Nemesis Holdings. It's Serafina. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. That's impossible. Serafina doesn't know how to set up an offshore shell company. She's a housewife. She studied art history. Marcus, if she owns the trust and the trust owns the houses. She owns the houses. Marcus finished, his voice trembling. It gets worse, Rourke said. I just had the paralegal run a check on Thorn Logic's founding IP patents, the code, the core algorithm you use to build the platform. I wrote that code, Marcus snapped, in our basement. You wrote the front end, Rourke said. But the patent for the predictive data engine, the thing that makes the company worth $400 million, it's not in your name, it's in the name of the original developer. I am the developer. No, Marcus. The patent is registered to S. Sterling, Serafina Sterling, dated 2014, 2 years before you incorporated. Marcus dropped the phone. It clattered onto the white tablecloth, knocking over a glass of red wine. The stain spread like a gunshot wound across the fabric. Babe, Jessica asked, pulling away. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Marcus couldn't breathe. She signed the waiver, his mind screamed. She waived her rights to marital assets. But if the houses and the IP weren't marital assets, if they were her separate property from before the marriage or held in trusts he didn't own, she hadn't waived anything. She had simply walked away with what was already hers, leaving him with nothing but the debt and the furniture. Give me the phone, Marcus hissed, scrambling for it. He dialed Serafina. The number you have reached has been disconnected. He dialed again. Disconnected. She planned this, Marcus whispered. She planned this whole thing. Who? Jessica asked, annoyed now. Serafina, Marcus screamed, causing the entire restaurant to turn and stare. She played me. She stole my company. Marcus, calm down, Dave said, standing up. Check social media. Maybe she posted something stupid. We can use it against her. Jessica pulled out her phone. She opened Instagram. Her thumb hovered, then scrolled, then stopped. Oh my God, Jessica whispered. What? Marcus demanded, snatching the phone from her hand. It was a post from TMZ. Breaking news. Uploaded 4 minutes ago. The headline read, The $1 billion rebound Serafina Thorn spotted in Monaco hours after divorce filing. Marcus stared at the photo. It was high resolution. It showed the deck of a super yacht, one of those massive floating cities that dwarfed regular boats. The name on the hull was visible in gold lettering, the Leviathan. Sitting on the sun deck wearing a white bikini and holding a glass of vintage Dom Perignon was Serafina. She looked relaxed, radiant. But it was the man sitting next to her that made Marcus's heart stop. The man was older, perhaps in his late 50s, with silver hair and a physique that spoke of personal trainers and private dojos. He was leaning in, whispering something into Serafina's ear, his hand resting familiarly on her shoulder. Every business student, every tech CEO, every person who read the Wall Street Journal knew that face. It was Julian Vane. Not just a billionaire. The billionaire. The man who owned the shipping lines, the satellite networks, the lithium mines. The man who was rumored to destabilize small governments for tax breaks. A man whose net worth made Marcus Thorne's $400 million look like pocket change. And Marcus realized with a sick twist of his stomach, Julian Vane was known for one other thing. He was the most ruthless corporate raider in the world. He bought companies, stripped them for parts, and left the CEOs destitute. The caption on the photo read, "Sources say Vane and the newly single Mrs. Thorne have been close collaborators for years. Is Thorne Logic the next target?" Marcus looked up at his friends. They were all looking at their phones. They were all looking at him, and for the first time he didn't see admiration in their eyes. He saw fear. Serafina hadn't just left him. She had gone to the Emperor. The Mediterranean sun was beginning to set, casting long, bruising purple shadows across the deck of the Leviathan. The yacht was so large it didn't rock with the waves. It simply displaced the ocean, a sovereign nation of steel and glass. Serafina Thorne. No. Serafina Sterling stood at the railing looking out at the glittering coastline of Monaco. The wind whipped at her hair, but she didn't move to fix it. For the first time in 10 years, she didn't have to be perfect. She just had to be victorious. "He's called 17 times in the last hour," a voice rumbled behind her. Serafina turned. The billionaire, the man the tabloids had identified as her new lover, was sitting in a wicker chair scrolling through a tablet. In the flesh, Sebastian Vane was even more imposing than his photos. He was 62, with eyes like flint and a reputation that made Wall Street bankers wet the bed. Note: the tabloids in Part 2 had misprinted his name as Julian, a common error for lazy journalists, but Marcus knew the truth. This was Sebastian Vane, the merchant of death for failing companies. "Only 17? Serafina asked, taking a sip of her sparkling water. "Marcus is losing his touch. I expected at least 50. "He's distracted," Sebastian said, tapping the screen. "My sources tell me he's currently screaming at his chief technical officer. Apparently they can't access the source code repository for the upcoming 3.0 update." Serafina smiled, a cold, small thing. "They won't be able to. I changed the encryption keys this morning at 9:00 a.m., right before I walked into the arbitration room." Sebastian chuckled, shaking his head. "You are a terrifying woman, Serafina. Remind me never to marry you." "Don't worry, Sebastian. You're safe. Our contract is strictly business." This was the first twist the world didn't know yet. Serafina and Sebastian weren't lovers. They were partners. 6 months ago, Serafina had discovered Marcus's affair with Jessica. She hadn't cried. She hadn't confronted him. Instead, she had gone to the library of their Tribeca home and pulled out the original incorporation binders for Thorne Logic. She traced the paper trail. She realized that Marcus, in his arrogance and laziness, had signed over power of attorney to her in 2015 so she could handle the boring tax stuff while he played visionary. She realized she owned the leverage, but she needed a hammer to swing it. She had met Sebastian Vane at a charity gala 3 years prior. Marcus had ignored Vane, calling him a dinosaur of the old economy. Serafina had spent 2 hours talking to him about supply chain logistics. Vane had been impressed. When she found out about the affair, she called Vane. "I have a company worth 400 million MR.T, she had told him. "But the CEO is a liability. I want to strip it, gut it, and sell the IP to the highest bidder. I need a partner with capital and a yacht to hide on while the dust settles." Vane had agreed on the spot. Back in New York, the dust wasn't just settling, it was choking Marcus Thorne. Marcus stormed into the server room of Thorne Logic's headquarters in Dumbo, Brooklyn. The room was freezing, filled with the hum of expensive machines. Silas, his CTO, a brilliant but socially anxious coder, was typing furiously, sweat beading on his forehead. "Fix it, Silas," Marcus roared. "Investors are calling me asking why the beta is down. Why can't we push the update?" "I'm trying, Marcus," Silas squeaked. "But the root directory, it's gone. It's been moved." "Moved? How do you move an entire platform?" "I didn't think it was possible, but the admin privileges were transferred at 9:05 a.m. to an external user, Nemesis admin." "Serafina," Marcus hissed. He paced the small room, running his hands through his hair. Okay, it's fine. It's just code. We have backups, right? Restore from the backup." Silas stopped typing. He swiveled his chair around, looking terrified. "Marcus, the backups were stored on the Amazon AWS server." "So, the billing account for the AWS server. It was on Serafina's personal American Express card, the one she used to build credit points for travel." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "And the card was canceled at noon. Amazon wiped the servers for non-payment an hour ago. The backups are gone." Silence descended on the server room. The only sound was the hum of the cooling fans cooling nothing. "Are you telling me?" Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. "That Thorn Logic, a company valued at nearly $500 million, currently consists of nothing but a nice logo and some rented office furniture?" "We have the front-end interface," Silas offered weakly. "The website looks nice. It just doesn't do anything when you click the buttons." Marcus slumped against the server rack. He slid down until he hit the floor. He had signed the divorce settlement. He had agreed that he kept the company and she took nothing. But she hadn't taken nothing. She had taken the soul of the company and left him with the corpse. His phone buzzed. It was Gavin Rourke, the lawyer. "Marcus," Gavin said, his voice hollow, "you need to come to my office. Now." "I can't, Gavin. I'm fixing a technical issue." "Screw the technical issue," Gavin snapped. "I just got a courier packet from Serafina's legal team. It's not just the house and the code, Marcus. It's the loans." Marcus squeezed his eyes shut. "What loans?" "The venture capital injection you took last year. The $50 million from Horizon Ventures to scale the business." "Yeah, I signed that. That's on the company." "Marcus, did you read the fine print on the personal guarantee?" "I don't read fine print, Gavin. That's what I pay you for." "I didn't review that loan," Gavin shouted back. "You said you handled it over a golf game with the partners. I'm looking at the document now. You put up the marital assets as collateral. But since you just signed a divorce decree stating that the houses and the IP are not marital assets but belong to Serafina's separate trusts," Marcus felt the room spinning. "Then the collateral for the $50 million loan defaulted the moment you signed the divorce papers," Gavin finished. "The bank is calling in the loan, Marcus. Immediately. They want $50 million by close of business tomorrow, or they seize your personal liquid assets, your bank accounts, your stock portfolio, everything." Marcus hung up the phone. He looked up at Silas. "Silas," Marcus said, "do we have $50 million in the operating account?" Silas checked the screen. We have 300,000. You spent $4 million last month on the rebranding launch party and the deposit for the Aspen house." Marcus stood up. He walked out of the server room. He walked past the rows of employees, 20-year-olds in hoodies who thought they were working for the next Steve Jobs. He walked into his glass-walled office and locked the door. He looked at the bottle of scotch on his desk. He didn't want a drink. He wanted a time machine. He dialed Serafina again. This time it didn't go to voicemail. "Hello, Marcus." Her voice came through the speaker crisp and clear. He could hear the sound of seagulls in the background. "Sarah," he choked out. "Sarah, please. You've made your point. You win. Just give me the encryption keys. Give me the house back. We can renegotiate." "Renegotiate," Serafina laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh. It was a genuinely amused sound which hurt more. Marcus, you spent 10 years telling me I didn't understand business. You told me I was just a support system. You told me the real work was done by the visionaries. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I was an idiot. Yes, you were. But that's not why I'm doing this. Then why? Marcus screamed. Why destroy everything we built? We didn't build it, Marcus. I built it. You sold it, she said coldly. And then you brought that woman into my bed. You brought her into the house I decorated, drove her in the car I paid off. You thought I was blind because I was quiet. I'll leave her. I'll fire Jessica, I swear. Oh, I don't care about Jessica, Serafina said. She's just a symptom of your disease. The disease is your ego, Marcus, and I'm the cure. Sarah, the bank is calling the loan. I'll be bankrupt. I'll go to jail for fraud. I know, she said soothingly. I sent the tip to the SEC this morning. Good luck, Marcus. I have a dinner reservation. The line went dead. The fall of Marcus Thorne was not a slow decline. It was a cliff dive. By 9:00 a.m. the next morning, less than 24 hours after the silent settlement, the news had broken. The Wall Street Journal ran the piece, Thorne Logic CEO under investigation for securities fraud. Key assets missing. Jessica, the mistress, was the first rat to sense the rising water. She was in the apartment Marcus had rented for her in Soho. She was watching the news on a massive flat-screen TV, eating a kale salad, when the anchor mentioned imminent bankruptcy and seizure of personal assets. Jessica stopped chewing. She looked at the Cartier bracelet on her wrist. Marcus had given it to her last week. If the feds were coming, they would take gifts purchased with illicit funds. Jessica stood up. She went to the safe in the closet. She knew the combination. It was Marcus's birthday. She opened it. Inside were stacks of cash Marcus kept for emergencies, about $50,000. There were also 3 watches and a hard drive. She swept it all into her gym bag. She didn't pack clothes. She didn't leave a note. She called an Uber Black to JFK Airport. She blocked Marcus's number. By the time Marcus got back to the apartment that evening, looking for comfort, the only thing left was a half-eaten salad wilting on the coffee table. But Marcus wasn't at the apartment yet. He was currently in hell. Hell in this case was the boardroom of Thorne Logic. Around the table sat the board of directors. These were men and women who had invested millions into Marcus's vision. They were not happy. "Explain this to me like I'm a 5-year-old, Marcus," said Eleanor Vance, the lead investor from Horizon Ventures. She was a woman who could cut glass with her jawline. "You divorced your wife. You gave her nothing. And now she owns the company's intellectual property. It's a misunderstanding." Marcus lied, sweat staining the armpits of his dress shirt. "It's a clerical error in the patent filing. We're clearing it up." "A clerical error?" Eleanor threw a file onto the table. "I just got off the phone with Serafina's lawyer, or rather the lawyer for Nemesis Holdings. They are offering to license the IP back to us." Marcus blinked. "What?" "She's offering to lease us the code. The code we thought we owned." "We can't pay her." Marcus slammed his hand down. "That's admitting defeat." "We have no choice," Eleanor shouted. "Without that code, the product is dead. How much does she want?" Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe Serafina just wanted money. Maybe he could buy his way out of this. "How much?" Eleanor looked at the paper. She looked pale. "She wants a licensing fee of $10 million a month. And," Eleanor hesitated, "and what?" "And she wants a seat on the board, the chairperson's seat." "That's my seat," Marcus shrieked. "Not anymore," Eleanor said quietly. She looked around the table. "I move for a vote of no confidence in CEO Marcus Thorne. All in favor." Every hand in the room went up. "You're fired, Marcus," Eleanor said. "Security will escort you out." Marcus stood there stunned. "You can't do this. I'm the founder." "You're a liability," Eleanor said. "And frankly, it looks like your ex-wife was the brains of the operation all along. We'd rather be in business with her." Two large security guardsmen Marcus had hired, men whose paychecks he signed, stepped forward. One of them took Marcus by the elbow. "Don't touch me," Marcus spat, shaking him off. "I'm leaving." He stormed out of the building carrying a cardboard box with a stapler and a photo of himself shaking hands with Elon Musk. As he walked out onto the cobblestone streets of Dumbo, the paparazzi were waiting. They swarmed him, flashes blinding him. "Marcus, Marcus, is it true you're bankrupt? Did Serafina plan this whole thing? Where is Jessica? Rumors say she was seen boarding a flight to Dubai." Marcus pushed through the crowd, his head down. He reached his Tesla. He tapped his phone to unlock the door. The app spun. "Access denied." He tapped it again. "Access denied. Owner has restricted access." "What?" Marcus yelled at the phone. "I am the owner." Then he remembered. The Tesla was registered to the company he had just been fired from. Eleanor had probably deactivated his digital key 30 seconds ago. Marcus kicked the tire. He kicked it again and again until he was screaming, tears streaming down his face. A billionaire turned beggar in the span of 48 hours. The cameras captured every second of it. Far away in the quiet luxury of the Mediterranean, Serafina watched the live feed on her laptop. Sebastian Vane poured 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to her. "Brutal," Vane noted, watching Marcus kick the car. "Effectively dismantled. The board just issued a press release. They've accepted your licensing terms. You are now the chairperson of Thorn Logic." "I know," Serafina said. She didn't look happy. She didn't look sad. She looked resolved. "So what's the next move?" Vane asked. "You go back to New York, take the throne." "Not yet," Serafina said. "Marcus is broken, but he's not finished. He still has one card left to play." "What card?" "He has no money, no company, no girl." "He has the media," Serafina said. "Marcus is a narcissist. When a narcissist is cornered, they don't just surrender. They try to burn the world down. He's going to go on TV. He's going to try to paint me as the villain. He's going to lie." "Let him," Vane shrugged. "Who will believe him?" "Everyone loves a victim," Serafina said. "Especially if he plays the scorned husband angle right. I need to make sure that when he opens his mouth, no sound comes out." "And how do you do that?" Serafina closed the laptop. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small black flash drive. "Part 2 of the plan," she said. "The mistress wasn't just a wedge to break up the marriage, Sebastian. I knew about Jessica long before I let Marcus know I knew." Vane raised an eyebrow. "You're saying you used her?" "I'm saying," Serafina said, turning the drive over in her fingers, "that Jessica wasn't just a pretty face. She was my spy. She just didn't know it." "You bugged her." "Better," Serafina said. "I introduced them." Sebastian Vane, a man who had toppled governments, looked at Serafina with genuine awe. "You set your husband up with a mistress so you could destroy him." "I set him up with a test," Serafina corrected. "If he had been loyal, nothing would have happened. Jessica would have just been the new intern. But Marcus couldn't resist. And because he couldn't resist, he told her secrets. Pillow talk, Sebastian. It's the most dangerous currency in the world." "And what's on the drive?" "Recordings," Serafina said. "Voice notes. Jessica liked to record their conversations to brag to her friends. She backed them up to the cloud, a cloud I had access to." She stood up, walking to the edge of the yacht. "Marcus is going to try to sue me for fraud. He's going to claim I stole the company. But when the world hears him admitting to tax evasion, bribery, and my personal favorite laughing about how he stole the original code from his college roommate, well," she tossed the flash drive in the air and caught it. "The divorce was the silent part," Serafina said. "Now comes the noise." 3 days after being fired from his own company, Marcus Thorne sat in the green room of the Brad Calver show. It was the most watched cable news program in the country. Calver was a shark, a man who thrived on outrage and scandal. Marcus had chosen this venue carefully. He knew Calver hated woke corporate culture and would eat up the story of a hard-working male genius stripped of his empire by a conniving ex-wife and a shadowy billionaire. Marcus looked in the mirror. He looked tired, but he had told the makeup artist to leave the dark circles. Let them see the pain, he thought. Let them see what she did to me. He smoothed his tie. He had bought this suit at a department store off the rack because his bespoke suits were locked in the Tribeca penthouse he was legally barred from entering. The polyester blend made his skin itch. 5 minutes, Mr. Thorne, a production assistant said, poking her head in. Marcus took a deep breath. This was it. The Hail Mary. If he could win the public, he could pressure the board. He could force a settlement. He could destroy Serafina's reputation before she could fully take the throne. He walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The applause was polite but hesitant. "Welcome back," Brad Calver said, leaning over his desk like a bulldog. "We're sitting down with Marcus Thorne, the man who invented Thorne logic, the man who revolutionized data prediction, and the man who 48 hours ago was living on the street while his ex-wife drank champagne on a mega yacht. Marcus, tell us, how did this happen?" Marcus leaned in, putting on his best hurt puppy face. "Brad, it's a tragedy. I trusted her. I spent 10 years building a future for us. I worked 18-hour days while she enjoyed the lifestyle. And when I hit a rough patch, instead of standing by me, she executed a premeditated hostile takeover. It's not just a divorce. It's corporate espionage." "Espionage?" Calver asked, eyes lighting up. "Those are big words." "She stole my intellectual property," Marcus lied effortlessly. "She tricked me into signing documents I didn't understand. She's a con artist, Brad, and she's backed by Sebastian Vane, a man known for destroying American businesses. They are trying to silence me." "Well, you're not silent now," Calver said, turning to the camera. "America, look at this man. This is what happens when the legal system is weaponized against—" Suddenly, the lights in the studio flickered. The massive screen behind Marcus, which had been displaying a flattering photo of him, turned static gray. Then it went black. "What's going on?" Calver snapped at his producers. "We lost the feed." "It's not us," a voice shouted from the control booth. "The signal is being overridden." On the screen a waveform appeared, an audio file. "What is this?" Marcus stood up, panic rising in his throat. "Turn it off!" A voice boomed through the studio speakers. It was unmistakable. It was Marcus's voice. But it wasn't the sad, humble voice he was using now. It was the arrogant, slurring voice of a drunk Marcus recorded months ago in the privacy of his bedroom with Jessica. Recording Marcus. "The investors are such sheep, Jess. I swear. I walk in there, throw around some buzzwords like neural networks and synergy, and they just write the checks." Jessica. "But aren't you worried they'll find out about the code?" Marcus laughing. "Find out what?" "That I didn't write it. Who's going to tell them Toby?" Jessica. "Don't talk about him. It's creepy." Marcus. "It's not creepy. It's business. Toby was a genius, but he was weak. He OD'd Jess. He died in that dorm room and left his laptop open. I didn't kill him. I just rescued his work. I took the hard drive. He didn't need it anymore. I took Atlas, renamed it Thorne Logic, and made $1 billion. It's natural selection." The audio cut. The silence in the studio was absolute. It was heavier than gravity. Brad Calver stared at Marcus. The audience stared at Marcus. Marcus stood frozen, his face draining of color until he looked like a wax figure. "Toby," Marcus whispered to himself. He hadn't thought about Toby in years. Toby Miller, his college roommate at MIT, the quiet kid who wrote code like poetry, the kid who died of a fentanyl overdose in 2014. "You stole it," Calver asked, his voice low. He wasn't playing a character anymore. He was genuinely disgusted. "You stole the code from a dead kid." "It's a deep fake," Marcus screamed, his voice cracking. "AI. It's AI generated. Serafina is doing this. She's framing me." But then the screen behind him changed again. It wasn't audio this time. It was a document. It was a police report from 2014. A campus police evidence log. It listed the items found in Toby Miller's room at the time of death. One laptop missing hard drive, and next to it, a receipt from a pawn shop in Cambridge, dated 2 days after the death. Sold. One hard drive. Seller Marcus Thorne. "She has the receipts," someone in the audience whispered loud enough to be heard. "Cut the feed," Marcus yelled, lunging toward the cameras. "Stop filming, I'll sue you all." He tackled a cameraman, knocking the equipment to the floor. The live feed went sideways, showing a blurry angle of Marcus Thorne wrestling with security guards, screaming obscenities. "Get off me!" Marcus howled as 2 burly guards dragged him off the stage. "I am the CEO, I am a visionary!" In the control booth, the producer turned to Brad Calver. "Did we just broadcast that to 5 million people?" Calver nodded slowly. "Yeah. And I think we just won an Emmy." Marcus was thrown out the back exit of the studio into a rain-slicked alleyway. His suit was torn. His shoe was missing. He scrambled up, breathing hard. His phone was vibrating incessantly in his pocket. He pulled it out. 142 missed calls. Text from Mom. "Marcus, is it true? Did you steal from Toby?" Text from Gavin Rourke. "Do not speak to anyone. The FBI is issuing a warrant. I am resigning as your counsel. Good luck." "No, no, no," Marcus hyperventilated. He leaned against the brick wall, sliding down into the trash. The FBI. Securities fraud was one thing, but admitting to theft of IP from a dead man that opened up a decade of lawsuits. The Miller family would come for him. The investors would sue for restitution. He was looking at 20 years in prison. He needed to run, but he had no money. His accounts were frozen. His credit cards were dead. Wait, he froze. The Hamptons house. He remembered something. 3 years ago, during a brief period of paranoia about the market crashing, Marcus had withdrawn $2 million in cash. He had hidden it in the wine cellar of the Hamptons estate behind a false panel in the climate control unit. He never told Serafina. He never told Jessica. It was his apocalypse fund. If he could get to the Hamptons, get the cash, and charter a private boat to the Caribbean, he might have a chance. He pulled his hoodie up. He had found a dirty gray hoodie in a donation bin near the alley and began to walk. He couldn't take a train. There were cameras. He couldn't call a car. He stole a bicycle. It took him 6 hours to bike out of the city, and then he hitchhiked the rest of the way with a truck driver who didn't speak English and didn't watch the news. By the time Marcus reached the Hamptons estate, it was 2 a.m. The massive house stood dark and silent against the crashing waves of the Atlantic. The rain was coming down in sheets now. Marcus hopped the fence. He knew the blind spots in the security cameras. He had installed them. He crept through the manicured gardens, shivering his stolen bike abandoned in the hedges. He reached the cellar doors. They were locked, but Marcus knew the keypad code. 1984. He thought he was Orwellian. The lock clicked. He slipped inside. The air smelled of oak and dust. He pulled out his phone, using the flashlight to navigate through the rows of expensive Bordeaux he could no longer drink. He reached the back wall. He found the climate control unit. With trembling hands, he pried at the false panel. His fingernails broke. He grabbed a wine bottle and smashed the wood. Splinters flew. He ripped the panel away. He reached into the dark cavity. His hand met nothing but air. "No," he whispered. He reached deeper. He felt around frantically. The duffel bag, the $2 million, it had to be there. It was empty. Looking for this. The voice came from everywhere. It was surrounding him. Marcus spun around, dropping his phone. "Who's there?" Suddenly the lights in the cellar blazed on. Marcus covered his eyes, blinded. At the top of the cellar stairs, sitting on a wooden crate, was a laptop. The screen was open. On the screen was a live video feed. It was Serafina. She was sitting in the cabin of the yacht wearing a silk robe. She looked warm. She looked comfortable. And she was holding a stack of $100 bills, fanning herself with them. "Sarah," Marcus gasped. You took it." "I took it 3 years ago, Marcus," Serafina said through the speakers. "Did you really think I didn't notice you withdrawing $2 million? I handle the accounts. I saw the withdrawal. I followed you. I watched you hide it. You let me think it was there. I needed you to have a destination," she said. "I knew that when the world collapsed, you'd run to your little safety net, like a rat to cheese." "Why?" Marcus sobbed, falling to his knees on the cold concrete. "Why torture me? Just call the cops." "I didn't call the cops, Marcus," she said softly. "I called someone else." "Who?" "Toby's mother." Marcus stopped breathing. "Mrs. Miller," he whispered. "She's a lovely woman," Serafina said. "She lives in Ohio. She's been mourning her son for 10 years, thinking he was just a junkie who threw his life away. She didn't know he was a genius. She didn't know his best friend stole his legacy." "Sarah, please." "I sent her the recordings, Marcus. And I sent her the location of this house. I told her you might be stopping by." "She's here." Marcus looked up at the cellar stairs, terrified. "No," Serafina said. "She's too old to travel that fast. But she has a lawyer, a very aggressive lawyer, and they called the local police to report a trespasser on the property, a property which, as you know, belongs to Nemesis Holdings." Sirens began to wail in the distance, getting closer. "You set me up," Marcus said, defeat washing over him. "I corrected the balance," Serafina corrected. "You built a castle on San Marcos. I just waited for the tide to come in." Marcus looked at the screen, at the woman he had underestimated for a decade. He realized now that the silence during the divorce wasn't submission. It was the deep breath a sniper takes before pulling the trigger. "Who are you?" Marcus asked. "You're not the woman I married." "No," Serafina said, leaning into the camera. Her eyes were hard as diamonds. "The woman you married was a role I played, a role you wrote for me, the dutiful wife, the shadow. But you forgot one thing about shadows, Marcus." "What?" "They get longer when the sun goes down, and it is very dark for you now." The cellar doors burst open. "Police, show me your hands." Flashlights cut through the gloom. Officers swarmed down the stairs, guns drawn. Marcus raised his hands. He looked back at the laptop screen. Serafina raised her glass of champagne. "Goodbye, Marcus." The screen went black. 18 months later, the sound of the heavy steel door slamming shut was the only clock Marcus Thorne had left. Inside the Federal Correctional Institution at Otisville, New York, time didn't move in hours or minutes. It moved in counts. The morning count, the lunch count, the evening count. Marcus sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at a blank composition notebook. He had been trying to write his memoir for 6 months. He had a title, The Icarus Algorithm: How I Built the Future and Was Robbed by the Past. But every time he put the cheap pen to the paper, his hand shook. He wasn't the Wolf of Wall Street. He wasn't a glamorous outlaw. In prison, he was a joke. The other inmates, mostly fraudsters and drug traffickers, called him tech support. If the TV in the common room broke, they made Marcus fix it. If the remote stopped working, they threw it at his head. He had lost everything. The money was gone, seized by the SEC and the banks. The houses were sold. Jessica was currently starring in a reality TV show called Gold Digger Island, where she openly mocked his performance in bed to millions of viewers. But the worst part wasn't the poverty or the humiliation. It was the silence. Marcus used to be surrounded by noise, applause, notification pings, Yes men laughing at his jokes. Now the world had simply muted him. He had sent 20 letters to Serafina. He had begged for forgiveness. He had begged for a loan. He had begged just to hear her voice. She had never replied, not once. Her silence was a prison wall thicker than the concrete around him. "Thorne!" a guard shouted, banging his baton against the bars. "TV time. You comin'?" Marcus sighed. "No, I'm writing." "Suit yourself. You're missing it. Your ex is on Bloomberg." Marcus dropped the pen. He scrambled to the bars. "What?" He ran out into the common room. A group of inmates were gathered around the small mounted television eating commissary popcorn. On the screen, the headline banner flashed in bold blue, "The New Era of Ethical AE, Serafina Sterling, Keynote, Live from Zurich." Marcus pushed past a convicted embezzler to get a better look. Serafina stood on a stage that looked like a spaceship. The lighting was soft, ethereal. She wasn't wearing the severe business suits anymore. She wore a white silk suit that flowed like water. She looked younger. She looked powerful. She looked happy. She was speaking to a crowd of 3,000 of the world's most powerful leaders. "For a decade," Serafina said, her voice calm and resonant, "we were told that technology requires disruption, that to build something great you have to break things, you have to break rules, you have to break people." The camera panned to the front row. Sebastian Vane was there, looking proud. Next to him sat an elderly woman with gray hair and thick glasses. Marcus recognized her instantly. It was Mrs. Miller, Toby's mother. "But that was a lie," Serafina continued. "Real innovation isn't about theft. It isn't about speed at the cost of truth. Today I am proud to announce the retirement of the Thorne Logic brand." The crowd murmured. Marcus gripped the back of a plastic chair so hard his knuckles turned white. "Don't you dare," he thought. "Don't you erase my name." "The name Thorne represents a legacy of ego," Serafina said. "It represents a black box where credit goes in and lies come out. Today, we are rebranding. We are releasing the source code back to the academic community, and we are launching a new platform dedicated to transparent open-source data prediction." Behind her, the massive screen changed. The logo of Thorne Logic, a sharp, aggressive T, shattered into digital dust. In its place, a new logo formed, a simple, elegant geometric design, and the name, the Miller Foundation. "We are naming the company after its true architect," Serafina said, gesturing to Mrs. Miller in the front row. The old woman was weeping, holding Sebastian Vane's hand. "All profits from the Miller platform will go toward funding STEM education for underprivileged students and supporting addiction recovery programs. We are not here to make billionaires. We are here to make amends." The crowd exploded. It wasn't polite applause. It was a standing ovation, a roar of approval that shook the speakers of the prison TV. Marcus stared at the screen. She had done the one thing he couldn't conceive of. She hadn't just taken the money. She hadn't just taken the power. She had given it away. She had destroyed his legacy not by stealing it, but by proving it was worthless compared to the truth. "Damn, Thorne," the inmate next to him laughed, slapping Marcus on the back. "She just flushed your name down the toilet and got a tax write-off for it. That's cold. That's ice cold." On the screen, a reporter thrust a microphone toward Serafina as she walked off stage. "Ms. Sterling, Ms. Sterling, do you have any comment for your ex-husband? He's currently serving 5 years in federal prison. Do you have anything you want to say to him?" Serafina stopped. She looked directly into the camera lens. For a second, Marcus felt like she was looking right into his soul, seeing the dirty prison jumpsuit, the graying hair, the desperation. She paused. The world held its breath, waiting for an insult, a gloat, a moment of vindication. Serafina smiled, a small enigmatic curve of her lips. "No," she said, and then she turned and walked away. The screen cut to a commercial for car insurance. Marcus stood there as the other inmates laughed and dispersed. He looked down at his hands. He realized he was shaking. She hadn't argued during the divorce, she hadn't argued during the takeover, and she wouldn't argue now. She had granted him the ultimate punishment. She had made him irrelevant. 3 months later, a package arrived at the prison mailroom. It was a standard padded envelope. The return address was Nemesis Holdings, Cayman Islands. Marcus tore it open with his teeth, his heart hammering. Was it money? Was it a letter? Was it a sign that she still cared even a little? He dumped the contents onto his cot. It was a book, a first-edition copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. There was no note. There was no inscription. Just a yellow sticky note on the cover with a single hand-drawn symbol, a smiley face. Marcus stared at the book. He touched the cover, and for the first time in 2 years, he started to laugh. He laughed until his ribs hurt. He laughed until the tears ran down his face and soaked the prison sheets. He laughed because he finally understood the joke. He was never the main character of this story. He was just the villain in her origin story. And the villain never gets the last word. The end. And that is the story of the silent settlement. Serafina Sterling proved that in a world full of noise-screaming matches and Twitter wars, the most dangerous weapon you can wield is silence. Marcus Thorne thought his wife was weak because she didn't fight back. He didn't realize that while he was playing checkers, she was playing 4D chess and she owned the board. She walked away with her dignity, her freedom, and eventually the entire empire, leaving him with nothing but his own ego to keep him company in a cell. It's a brutal reminder. Be careful who you underestimate. The quiet ones aren't quiet because they have nothing to say. They're quiet because they're plotting. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate karma, smash that like button right now. It helps the channel grow. And tell me in the comments, would you have taken the money? Or would you have destroyed the legacy like Serafina did? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next crazy true story. Thanks for watching.